This is an interview with Layne Norton for proteinfitness.com. First of all, slightly unrelated question. Have you been watching the Olympics?
Yeah, I have.
And how do you find that so far? What's your favourite event that's been so far?
I like a lot of the events. I guess sprinting, and the track events. I think those are pretty cool. And then obviously, like, the weightlifting is cool to watch. And there's some ridiculously strong guys there. And then I actually like the gymnastics a lot too. I think those are cool.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess a lot of those sports, if you do weightlifting, any sort of training, you can relate to a bit more easily.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the main thing I want to talk to you about is kind of popular among even Arnie is he recently posted an article about this. It's called backloading, which I'm sure you'll be aware of. Yeah. So I wondered what your thoughts are on that. Is it something you've ever implemented yourself or with clients? Is it something you're interested in? Just in general, any comments?
Well, I think it's funny. History is circular, so nothing is new. It all just gets reinvented. I've seen this stuff 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever you want to call it, and people come out with it like it's new. I think it's fine to have carbs at night. I mean, there's certainly the argument against eating carbs at night is that you're going to sleep, your metabolism slows down, you're more likely to store them as fat. That's just not true. What the research shows is that actually, overall, your metabolism actually slightly speeds up from a resting metabolic rate whenever you sleep. As long as you get into the REM sleep, that deep sleep, you actually have a slightly higher metabolic rate. And there was actually a study done that showed that people that ate a greater percentage of carbs at night actually ended up losing more body fat than people that ate them earlier in the day. Now, from what I've seen of backloading, at least what's been reported to me by people who follow me on Twitter and send me messages, is that people are saying, okay, don't eat any carbs at all during the day, or very low, and then just eat like an enormous amount at night. I think that's pretty asinine. I think that the overall determinant of body composition is going to be your daily protein, carb, and fat intake. And, I mean, people who have a better carb tolerance are going to be able to eat more carbs. But taking somebody who has a very low carb tolerance, who is more likely to store body fat, and just say, okay, well, if you just eat, don't eat any carbs during the day and eat a ton at night, you won't gain any body fat. I think that's completely bogus. So I think, it's fine to eat them at night, and I tend to eat more at night because I train later in the day. But my personal belief is that there's nothing magical about nighttime or morning time. The study that was done that showed that you lost more body fat eating carbs at night, I think the reason they found that was because they were not eating any carbs during the day, so they had a long, essentially not fasting period, but period without carbohydrates with low insulin. I think if they did it where they did most of the carbs in the morning and then kind of, fasted or stayed away from carbs the rest of the day, they would have found similar results. That it wasn't the time of day that was causing it, it was the fact that they were having this prolonged restriction of carbohydrates. So, I think that, timing carbohydrates is important, but I would time them around your workout and not necessarily a time of day. If you train in the morning, you have more of your carbs in the morning. If you train at night, have more of your carbs at night. That's when you need them most. That's when your body can tolerate them best. And that's when I would consume them.
Yeah, certainly. I think as well, practically, a lot of people have got fantastic results by front-loading carbs and even doing the exact opposite of carb backloading, where they take in their carbs pre-training, during training, and then have a essentially zero carb period afterwards, or very restricted carbohydrates after training. And I've experienced, really good body composition results from that. Contest diets, I've seen some people implement that, and it's worked great. So yeah, I totally agree. And I think another point that I find quite interesting about carb backloading is the sort of psychological aspect where people seem to justify the most kind of outrageous eating habits. Like it's okay to go and eat a load of junk food because that's what I'm supposed to do. Whereas in practice, you think, well, sure, that's nice every now and again, maybe you can get away with it, but it's not the healthiest approach to a diet. Around you can certainly justify a lot of ridiculous eating habits.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people kind of like, people ask me about intermittent fasting all the time. I'm not going to get into that because I've covered that ad nauseum, and people that follow that tend to be kind of almost zealot-like. But a lot of people use that, or even IIFYM, as a reason to just kind of binge eat. Like that's okay, well, I'm not eating during the day, so I'll just eat a crap load at night, and I'll just eat whatever I want. And I mean, while I don't tell people, oh, don't eat these foods and don't eat these foods. I'm kind of a middle of the road guy. I think a moderate, a healthy amount. If you want a slice of pizza, okay, have a slice of pizza, but fit it into your protein, carb, and fat numbers. But don't eat nothing during the day and eat a whole pizza at night. I mean, that's just, you're just trying to validate poor eating habits that way. And I mean, actually, it's kind of an eating disorder if you think about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've experienced that myself. I tried, me and a couple of other guys who on the website with me, we tried doing ADF for a little bit, alternate day fasting. And it kind of creeps up on you, this idea that, oh, wow, because I didn't eat anything yesterday, I can go wild today, I can eat whatever I like. And even though you start off with the best intentions, you might have some porridge with like protein powder in, gradually you start adding in things like chocolate bars and sweets, and then it becomes, because you don't see any negative body composition changes for a while with this kind of setup. In fact, it seems to be very good for preserving condition, if not gaining muscle. I mean, I think it's quite poor for gaining muscle actually, but you just end up justifying this whole kind of almost backwards like approach to dieting, that you're kind of punishing yourself and then kind of not rewarding yourself, but you're just going wild and forgetting the whole point of the diet was actually meant to be something to do with your health. And I certainly see elements of that with carb.
Yeah, I discourage people from doing any kind of eating protocol where they're binging and fasting. You know what I mean? I don't think it's a healthy way to live. I think I'm much more of a middle of the road kind of guy.
So the other main thing I want to talk to you about is I've noticed that you're going back onto a daily undulating periodization routine. I think you said you were going to be squatting 4 times a week, benching 3 times, deadlifting twice. Now,
deadlifting 3 times actually. I read it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you find that in terms of stress on your joints, in terms of recovery? I know there's guys that are out there like John Broz who, in fact, have athletes doing pretty much that, but taken to a whole other level. They're maxing out every day, not even changing the kind of rep ranges or the load.
Yeah.
How do you find that?
Well, the first thing about Broz's training that a lot of people misinterpret is they're not actually, like, that's not a completely psyched up, all out 1 rep max. That's more of like you just go up, you walk up to the bar, and whatever you can do that day, just kind of calm, you do it. So there's a big difference between kind of squatting like that and doing an actual 1 rep max where you're completely jacked up, everything you got. I mean, that's an enormous amount of stress on your nervous system and everything. I do like what John Broz said when people asked him about who say, well, I only squat 1 time a week because any more than that's overtraining. He said if somebody kidnapped your family and held them ransom, and the ransom was you had to increase your squat max by 100 pounds in 12 weeks, would you only squat once a week? And the obvious answer is no, you would squat all the time. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think, the high frequency routines that a lot of times people, we have this notion of overtraining out there that, there is such a thing as overreaching. But what most people, when they hear the word overtraining, they associate that with the muscle becomes catabolic and you do not recover and you lose muscle mass. That has never, ever, ever, ever been shown. Overreaching is basically your performance goes down, you lose a little bit of strength, you lose a little bit of endurance, your hormonal profile may be kind of whacked, and you lose the drive to train. You don't want to train. But actually what they've shown in research is when you overreach like that, when you come back out of that, when you allow yourself some recovery after that, you actually get like almost like a snapback effect to where you actualize all those gains, and you actually end up making a ton of gains in that snapback period. So I like what my friend Dr. Mike Zordos told me one time. He said, I always tell people, who gives a shit what you feel like while you train? As long as you get stronger at the end of the cycle and you kill it on meet day, you set new personal records. Who cares if you don't feel good while you're training? You're not supposed to feel good. You're supposed to. If you're training hard, you're supposed to feel fatigued. You're supposed to be hard. Your worst session should be when you're training, because you want your best session to be when you're on the platform or when you're trying to perform. So I think people need to get away from, people get this idea, okay, I'm sore, I'm tired, I'm obviously overtrained. Well, no, you're probably not. You probably just need to suck it up. And maybe you're overreached, but that's actually a good thing, because whenever you finally back off that a little bit, you're going to actualize those gains. So this idea that we've got to avoid any kind of overtraining or overreaching is kind of garbage. The other thing about high frequency routines and high volume routines is that people don't think about weightlifting as a skill, but it is a skill. It's, these Olympic lifters is a perfect example. They train that lift every single day, every day, because it's a skill. They need to get better at that skill. If you're a baseball player, do you only throw a ball once a week because you're worried about overtraining your arm? No, you're going to throw every day. If you're a soccer player, do you only practice, I guess over there it'd be football. Do you only practice kicks? Do you only practice on the field once a week because you're worried about overtraining? No, you practice every single day because that's a skill you need to hone and acquire. Same thing with weightlifting. So the thing about, these periodization routines that people need to realize is that most times you should not be training to failure. If you're training to failure every single workout, yes, you're going to overreach, and you're going to overreach fast, and you're going to overtrain fast. But if you're taking it to, heavy but sub-maximal, you're going to be able to repeat that several times, and you're going to get the benefits of all that constructive, continuous practice. That continuous practice can make you much better at the lift. So as far as stress on the body, stress on the joints, that's why you vary the rep ranges. That's why you vary the loads, because you don't want to be going, to a 3-rep max every single time you train. But you're going to have little dinks and dunks here and there, but that's, the point of periodization is you have periods of high intensity and periods of low intensity to recover from that. The other thing is, with a high frequency routine, you will basically learn good technique or you will get injured. So it's, there's certainly a probability of that, but, it's about being smart, it's about using good form, and, making sure that you listen to your body, and that if you need to, back off for a day, that you do that. Because, there's a difference between muscle soreness and the kind of, where you've strained something or you've, inflamed something, that kind of soreness. Most people can recognize the difference between those two things.
Yeah. I think that drives home the point that, like you say, a lot of it is being able to actually look objectively your own, your own feedback you're getting, sort of biomechanical feedback from day-to-day sessions, and actually regulate your own training volume, regulate the loads that you're using. Because we find with our clients that when we work on a sort of undulating periodization program, where we're just saying work up to like a max triple or something, or max set of 5, which is whatever your working weight is on the day, people tend to actually progress a lot better than when we try and prescribe fixed percentages a lot of the time. Now, obviously, those are handy if you have, I guess, some sort of powerlifting meet coming up, and you actually need to be able to plan things out and know where you're at ahead of time, and then be able to work towards like a kind of peak week. But yeah, I totally.
That's the kind of the original daily periodization was basically based on kind of like Bulgarian stuff, where it's the idea being that as an athlete, you're not going to be your best every single time you go in. There's going to be days where you feel like crap. There's going to be days where you're not going to perform as well. So you should base your training off kind of how you feel, how you're performing on that day. and base your working sets off that. So there's some, like the Bulgarians will go in and they will work up to a the Bulgarians will go in and they'll work up to a, they're kind of like Broz, they'll work up, they'll squat 6 times a week, work up to a max, an unpsyched max every single day, and then whatever that max is, like let's say one day it's 500 pounds, then they'll back off by 10% and do, sets of 2 to 3 reps with whatever weight that is. So that'd be like 450 pounds they do sets with. But maybe the next day they come in and they feel terrible and their max is only, 460. Well, then they back off 10% and they do working sets with, would be like around 405, something like that. So, they're kind of inherently self-regulating that way.
Yeah, so that sort of leads me on to another question, which is kind of related, which is in terms of things like rep schemes, rep protocols, and managing fatigue and trying to achieve hypertrophy while managing the load on the central nervous system. Have you experimented with stuff like extended sets where actually I don't know whether you're familiar with what's called Myoreps, where a guy called Blade, he's a really smart guy, Norwegian personal trainer. You might have read some of his articles. He basically says that what you do to try and achieve maximum fiber activation while minimizing fatigue is you do these sort of mini sets of like 3s or 5s, and you do one big extended set where you reach activation of the muscle fibers by doing these what's called an activation set, which might just be 8 to 12 reps or something, which isn't a failure, but it's just at the point where you're starting to slow down. And then you have a little rest, you do 3 to 5 more, and so on. And that way...
So it's basically, I've done it before, it's essentially like rest pause, kind of.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And the other interesting thing, and the reason I wanted to bring this up as well, is that the way he typically implements that is by shortening the range of motion of most of the movements he's doing to try and achieve a kind of occlusion effect. And I know that's something that you recently, I've seen some videos of you with Aaron Singman, and it looks really cool. And I was just wondering to what extent you think that's a viable approach to adding in occlusion training in a very sort of safe way, and whether you think it's comparable.
First off, I'm going to stop you. Occlusion training has never been shown to have any detrimental effects towards health. So, at least that I've seen. The only way you're going to cause, because you're not supposed to use the wraps so tight that you're only supposed to occlude venous return. You're not going to be occluding arterial delivery of blood to a muscle. So you should never be like in a necrotic situation, and most occlusion protocols are only 5 to 6 minutes that you'll have the wraps on. There's no way you're going to cause necrosis of tissue or anything like that in that period of time. And to my knowledge, to my best of my knowledge, there are no studies that have shown negative side effects from occlusion training. Now, to answer your question, yes, you can get a mild occlusion benefit from shortening that range of motion, from really focusing on a contraction, and building those metabolic byproduct accumulation. And what I would say to you is that that's fine, and that, I think rest pause sets are a very useful way to implement to get more activation. Maybe not the best thing for strength, but for hypertrophy, certainly, at the end of a workout, doing something like that, I think is perfectly reasonable. I will say that occlusion has unique benefits that you're not going to get from just doing straight reps like that, because tell me of another protocol that you can do where you can just walk and have hypertrophy. Because occlusion causes hypertrophy with just walking in untrained people. So, low intensity exercise is not going to cause that unless you're doing enormously high reps, going to failure. Which I would say, okay, you can do that. It's going to take you forever to get to that failure point, or you could just occlude, and you will get there much more quickly. It's a lot easier, and it's just a little bit more practical, in my opinion, than having to sit there and do 100 reps of an exercise because you're only using 20% of your 1 rep max. So yeah, I mean, I heard people speculate about negative effects of occlusion and whatnot, and I can see that if you're having reps on for 30, 40 minutes, an hour, or something like that. But again, all of the papers from Jeremy Lemke, who you want to look up, but all of the meta-analysis I've seen on it has not shown any detrimental benefits to it. But a big part of it is how tight you wrap reps. So, like we use knee wraps for practical occlusion. And you want to wrap at about a 7 out of 10 tightness. So if 10 is the maximum tightness, you can only want to do about 70% of the maximum tightness.
Okay, well that's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, fantastic answer. One other thing I wanted to talk to you about was, I guess, in your own training, you've had the opportunity to train with guys like Ben Mikulski, who's just a monster, and obviously, you know, I mean, it's not like you're a weakling yourself. I mean, you've set numerous powerlifting records. You've won everything there is to win in natural bodybuilding. How do you find continued motivation with your training? I know you talk a lot about, you know, working harder than other people. You do that in every aspect of your life, but where does that come from for you? What is it that keeps driving you, even though you've achieved a lot?
When I was younger, it probably came from me being insecure about people making fun of me growing up and wanting to prove them wrong, which was good because it actually, you know, pushed me. I felt like I would always feel like I'd have to work twice as hard as the guy next to me if I wanted to even get the same results as him, just because growing up, I never was that talented at anything. I had a lot of people tell me I couldn't do things, so I just felt like, okay, people, you know, maybe I don't have good genetics or talent, but I'm going to work. If I work harder than everybody else, it's the great equalizer.
Yeah.
So that's where that kind of came from. As far as now, basically, to keep myself motivated, I find things that are interesting to me. You know, little things I can pick out. So right now, my big motivation is to break a 1,700-pound total in raw powerlifting in a 220-pound class. And actually, the all-time drug-tested record without knee wraps in powerlifting for the 220-pound class is 17:08. And I would love to have a shot at breaking that. I think that I can have a shot at breaking it. So things like that keep me motivated, you know, as well as just, you know, continuing progression. I've always said, you know, if you're not getting better at whatever you do, you're getting, you know, it's the same thing, it's getting worse. I think, you know, I heard a quote one time that was the enemy of the best is not the worst, it's okay, average, mediocre, you know, because that's the comfort level. Nobody's really comfortable with being the worst at something, but people can be comfortable with being average.
Actually means that you have achieved something notable, even if it, you know, whereas mediocrity, pretty much anyone can do that. Being the worst.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Some people would argue that it's better to be the worst at something than it is to be mediocre, you know. If you're gonna do it big, you know. But yeah, I'm just, I don't know, man. I've always been very intrinsically motivated, and my biggest fear in life, even when I was young, was to basically be vapor and have, you know, not make an impact on the world. And I realize, you know, bodybuilding, powerlifting, some people look at that as a vanity thing, and it's, you know, it's not, you know, maybe I'm not curing cancer, but I always felt like, you know, I want to put something out there, I want to contribute to the world. I want to be, you know, I want to be somebody of notoriety, you know, not for the sake of being famous or anything, but for the sake of, you know, you want to build a legacy. Like, that's my biggest goal is that when I'm 75 years old or when I'm dead, you know, people look back and they say, you know, wow, look at all the things Layne did. He did it the right way. He did it with integrity. He treated people right. And look at this, you know, legacy he was able to leave. And, you know, I had my great uncle pass away last week, and he was somebody I looked up to quite a bit. He actually paid for a large portion of my schooling for college. I wouldn't be able to go to the college I went to if it wasn't for him. And when I was at his funeral, it just struck me by how many people talked about how much integrity this man had, and how much he did for the community, and how much of a legacy he left. And I came away actually very motivated from that. Obviously sad that I lost a family member, but very motivated from that, because it was like, you know, when you're gone, that's the only way you live on is if you leave something like that. So that may seem like a very weird answer, but that kind of is my motivation for doing all this stuff. I want to leave something that even when I'm gone, people can still look at and appreciate.
No, I suppose in a sense what he's saying is you want to achieve immortality, which is a pretty laudable goal. I mean, doing a PhD itself, I mean, that's something which, long after you're gone, people are going to be referencing. People will know about what work you've done, and so even though it's not, obviously, it's on top of everything else you've done with your physique and with your powerlifting, and like you say, with your personal life, you're trying to leave a mark which other people will go back and, it's a bit like, Isaac Newton's famous saying, standing on the shoulders of, if I've seen further than other men, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. If you can be one of those people that, someone standing on your shoulders in 50, 100 years time, then that's something.
It's absolutely true. I had a lot of, I had a lot of people tell me I couldn't do things, but I also had a lot of people that supported me, that propped me up. My uncle's one of them, my grandfather's another, my parents, my great parents. I have great colleagues that helped me out with research and everything, that supported me. I think that quote is 100% accurate. If I've seen far, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. And, a lot of what I encountered from my family and Uncle Bill, actually, who, like I said, paid for a lot of my schooling, he just told me, he said, I don't want anything from you. All I want is that one day in the future you do this for somebody else. So that's actually, one of the things I want to do in the future is, start up a scholarship or something like that through my company. Just because that's really what it's about, is passing on this knowledge. Real quick, I posted on my Facebook the other day, actually, because I've worked with probably about a dozen people who have gone on to become coaches themselves, and a few of them, very highly successful, are making essentially a full-time living out of it now. And I had some people ask me one time, they said, doesn't that bother you that people worked with you and now they make money off, and they're direct competitors to you? And I actually said no. First off, I'd be a hypocrite if I said yes, because I worked with Dr. Joe Klemczewski, when I was younger, and when I got into coaching, he gave me his blessing and was very helpful. So I'd be a huge hypocrite if I said no, or if I said yes, it bothered me. The other thing is, too, is I think there's plenty of business to go around, and if I'm good at what I do, it's not going to affect me. If I'm good at what I do, people are going to want to hire me anyway. And I'm glad to see these other guys, and gals going out and making a mark, because they're going to do it. They're going to do what maybe what I did for them, they're going to do for somebody else, and then that person's going to do it for somebody else, and you keep passing it on. It's a powerful amplification, and there's just a lot of. The fitness industry gets a terrible rap because we do have a lot of gurus and people who are just outright shady, who give bad advice, who take people's money, who have no integrity, and all they care about, when they look at a person, all they see is dollar signs. They don't see a person. And I can't put all those guys out of business myself, but if I can pull up an army of coaches and trainers to put them out of business, then that would be great.
It's fantastic. I mean, I do love the You Got Guru tweets a lot, and so much of it is just things which make my head spin as well when people come out with that nonsense. And like you say, I mean, in a way, I was going to say the only other option for you to now achieve additional fame in another arena is to become some sort of crime fighter. But this, in a way, is kind of like that. You're not necessarily going to be Batman, but you can be the Batman of the fitness industry.
Guru Snyder, that's what I want,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm all for people having different opinions and those sorts of things, but when you basically act like God, that nobody questions your word, that you have all the answers, and if somebody, a lot of these clients, I've heard people tell me that have worked with some gurus that if they asked him any question, it was like, well, just do it because I told you to do it. Don't ask me questions. You don't believe, and you should trust your coach, but at the same time, if I can't provide a good response, if I can't provide any kind of justification, then I deserve to get fired. And I'll be honest, sometimes I'll do things out of intuition, where I'm not really sure, exactly, I don't have a study to back it up. But if I do that, I will be straight up and tell somebody that. I'll be like, look, I'm going on a hunch here. I don't know for sure, but I'm going to give it a go. So I I hope you trust me on this. And I'll do it that way, but I won't ever say, don't question me. You know what I mean?
Well, I think if you're unable to answer questions, that either means that you have you're either incredibly arrogant or you are unable to answer the questions in the first place, and both of those things are bad. So it just yeah. Exactly. So, and I know this is getting close to the half-hour mark now. In fact, we've just gone over it, so I'm not sure if you have any time to spare now, because I know we said half an hour.
I don't, man. I'm sorry.
That's fine. No, I was going to say thanks so much for your time, because I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate you taking even half an hour out of your day, because that's probably a lot. So I'll take it off now, and I just thank you again for your time. This has been Layne Norton, speaking to Ben from Protein Fitness. Have a great day, Layne. Take care.
You have a great one, man.